Welcome to Milk Market Tidbit for the December Dairy Products Report. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones with Farm Institute. Now, this report came out several days ago, and I'm quite late on getting this because as it was coming out, I was coming down with a pretty severe case of COVID, and I'm finally got enough voice and enough energy to record this and put this together. So I apologize for it being late. All right, so as we close out a month, we first get the milk production report, and then we get the cold storage report, and then finally, actually quite a bit later, we get the dairy products report. And this came out, on the 5th. Now, what I like about the dairy products report, because we can tie it back to the cold storage report and try to get some sort of an estimate of demand. Now, there's enough flux in this for the fact that fresh cheese doesn't have to go in the cold storage for 30 days, that there's a little bit of a time delay. So we'll kind of look at that, but that's how I kind of put this data together. And again, I pulled together these graphs to where I give you a seasonal projection and then what actually happened this month. And what I'm looking for is what changes are happening right now. I'm not as concerned about year over year kind of numbers because this line takes into the seasonal trends, but what I want to know is what's going on. So here is the what I call cheese to milk ratio, and really it assumes 10 pounds of milk makes a pound of cheese, and so this kind of gives you a sense of how much milk went into cheese, and you can see that more milk went into cheese than was expected and more than the trend line. So we're pushing milk into cheese. And if we look at our cheese production, it's above the seasonal number, but a little bit below the trend line. And so right now I would say that cheese is growing as we would expect it to do. So it increased the way it would, in a typical December over a typical November. What I really like about the dairy products report is it can allow me to calculate what I call my rolling disappearance. And this is like a rolling herd average where you add 1 month, take a month a year ago off. And again, we've said this for the last couple months that right now everything is flat. We've got just a very flat demand and production. It'd been going up. We had a flat period back here in 2019, 2020. But if we do the calculations and kind of look at this, what it says is we've got a rolling demand about 38,664 pounds of cheese per day. But let's look at this December number, and we made 39,034. So we're making a little bit more cheese than what our rolling demand would suggest. Again, if we look at kind of the big picture, it says that we need about 9.4 million cows. We're just a little under that. We're probably going to have a little bit more milk than this would suggest. But again, all of this is on a pound of milk, irregardless of components. And so I may have to look at the calculation a little bit differently, but that's only on the calculation. The graph itself is just the disappearance and production of cheese. It's always constructive to look at the percentages of cheese. And right now we've got Italian is always the highest. But it is declining at a pretty good rate. And American is a little bit lower. It's about 3 percentage points lower. But these are going to intersect out here somewhere in the future. And I think when they intersect, that would say that we've built more cheese plants that are making American style cheese as opposed to Italian. But we've got no major differences off of the trend line, and the green line is the cheddar line. It's decreasing just a little bit, and we're pretty much on trend line. So there was no big shift in how cheese was being made, and we've got some shifts back in here when at the end of 2019 when things were a little bit on shaky ground, but then we got all back to standard here. Let's take a look at butter, and one of the things that I like to look at is how much fat goes into butter, and it's usually somewhere around 20%, but it's been declining. More fat went into butter than we had anticipated seasonally, and it's higher than the trend line. And if we look at our butter production, it was up above the seasonal number and above the trend line. And this is kind of an interesting scenario because we got the cold storage report, and the industry just kind of went, blah, we got a shortage of butter and a shortage of butter. And now all of a sudden it's starting to look like, well, maybe we don't. We were actually making more butter than we thought we were, and that's why prices of butter have kind of come back down here a little bit. And as I've said all along, I'm about a 275 per pound of butter kind of guy, and that's exactly where the spot market was yesterday. We'll look at some of the other products. Ice cream is seasonally low at the moment. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. And yogurt is also seasonally a bit low. So the other products are not being made up as much as we would have thought they were. And again, if you're going to have more fat going into butter and more milk going into cheese, it makes sense that these other products are going to be suffered a little bit. Of course, everybody says, let's look at exports. So we got the dairy export numbers. I stole this graph from DFA. I always like to give credit wherever I steal stuff from. And if we look at the total cheese exports in December, it was 6.65% of what we actually made in December. We just cannot get that over 7%. And butter is really low, about 2.25%, but we're probably importing closer to 3%. So I think we're a net importer of butter, which makes sense because our butter price is some of the highest in the world. So here is my take, kind of setting back and look at this. I think cheese production is strong with more milk going into cheese. Demand is, I'm going to call it flat, and exports are under 7%. So again, that's probably a bit of a bearish scenario. Butter production was strong with more fat going into butter, but I think demand is reasonably good. And exports are under 3%, so we're probably a net importer of butter. Production of other products, and I'm talking about ice cream and yogurt, were a bit weaker. The dairy products report wraps up December, and this week is pretty well wrapped up. And so next week, it's a pretty quiet week actually. We're going to have the statistical uniform prices starting on Monday, and we're going to have a national dairy sales report on Wednesday. Otherwise, we're going to be looking for the data the next week, which is going to be fairly jam-packed, but it's also going to be a 4-day week with the holiday on the 19th.